Welcome into another edition of Talkin' Jets Reality Check. There he is, Jets Chaos, aka Jeremy, back in the home base. I am Matt O'Leary. Jeremy, how's it going, my friend? Finally back at home.
We are good, man. The 70-degree weather is agreeing with me, believe it or not. It feels pretty good. It feels pretty good, but I'm already missing that bacon, egg, and cheese on a roll.
It's the
I'm
best.
missing.
Well, apparently this week you got to go Taylor ham, egg, and cheese this week.
I
What?
know, you know what? In honor of Mike Williams, I'm more than happy to. It's good, it's fine, but like everybody forgets that's a Jersey thing, and as Long Island. I mean, in Brooklyn, the breakfast sandwich was bacon. Like
Yeah.
we do bacon with our egg and cheese, but I went out to Jersey. I explored. I went to the tailgate. Somebody handed me a pork roll / Taylor ham, egg and cheese. Just I don't want to offend anybody. It was very, very delicious. I liked it. I don't blame Mike Williams for signing just for those sandwiches.
I was gonna say the Jersey guys they get very offended if you call it the wrong thing. I was like, I people in my comments like, I'm from Long Island. I really don't care what you call it. We know what you mean. It either whatever it is. As our guy NY Flight Jets Talk, aka Connor, goes bacon, egg, and cheese. On the money once again, as
Yeah.
per usual. There, this is our official stance. We let Green Bean and Ryan, they could be the Taylor Ham guys, and we'll be the bacon fellas.
Yeah. I don't see how, as far as I'm concerned, how can you ever be wrong with bacon?
Never. Yeah, the answer is never to that. And honestly, that's kind of a good segue into our first topic here, Jeremy, where what we wanted to start the program with today is the New York Jets draft strategy. So free agency, obviously taking the big focus right now, as expected. It's the first 2 weeks of free agency, but quickly approaching is the NFL draft. And for a while, most people, there were some outliers, but most people wanted the Jets to fill offensive line in the first round of the NFL draft. Now it feels like, okay, you have your 5 starters on the offensive line. You also brought in a wide receiver too in Mike Williams. So the Jets have options going into round 1. At least that's my take on it. I think that they have a variety of ways that they can go, and that's a good thing. How do you look at the New York Jets and their draft strategy now?
100%. I think what we were talking about 2 weeks ago, and then even last week when it wasn't complete yet, I think one of the big things we said was it would be nice to go into the draft without a glaring hole. And when we signed Mike Williams, that filled the glaring holes. That was like, boom, we got the backup quarterback, we got the 3 offensive linemen, we got the backup wide receiver. Now we're thin in all these positions, right? But that's another reason why the draft strategy is so open, because you can't say, oh, well, we need to take this position because we're thin in it. What if this guy goes down? Because you could say that for all the positions, right? There's a lot of places you could say that. I like the freedom and the space, the breathing room to say, wow, if somebody special drops to 10, we don't have to sit there and say, what can we do? We just don't have a left tackle. We have no choice. And we have to ignore that. We're in a position where if somebody that JD absolutely loves, that he has ranked super high on his board, top 4 guy, comes down to 10, which is possible because it's happened before on his very own board,
Yep.
we could be in a position to grab that player. And I think that's a great thing.
It absolutely is a great thing. And I was on the AFC East roundtable earlier today with Jake Asman and Richie from Jets Media. And Asman coined a phrase that I really like, and I hope it catches fire for the Brock Bowers crowd. They are now going to be referred to as Bauer Boys. They are the ones who want to draft Brock Bowers at pick number 10. And then you have the we all combined on in the chat are calling the offensive line crowd the O-line ogres. So you're either an O-line ogre or you're a Bauer boy. We still got to come up with wide receiver and maybe a trade down option, but that's kind of the point, right? Is like you could stay put at pick number 10 and make a strong case for either going Brock Bowers a wide receiver if Rome Odunze, or maybe you like Brian Thomas Jr. that much, or you could take an offensive lineman because you can make the case that, you know, you don't have a tackle of the future at either side. And if someone gets banged up like Tyron Smith does every year, this guy's going to play. Or you could go, you know what, we're going to trade out, move down, and then we have a swing in the first round and a second round to maybe do both and go for an offensive lineman and a wide receiver. I think I'm leaning towards that being my favorite option, Jeremy. The trade back a few spots, gain a second round pick, and attack both of the Jets' biggest positions of needs in the first 2 rounds.
Yeah, I mean, you got to satisfy the wacky wideouts. That's what I call the people who want the wide receivers. And you know,
Downers. There we go.
One of the ways we could do that is the trade downers. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, look, Jake and Richie, you know, they're good up and coming YouTube content providers. They come up with some good stuff sometimes. Those guys. One day they'll get up to your level, O'Leary and Ryan and Greenbean's level. But I'm proud of those guys. They're coming along. They're coming along. But in seriousness, I love the trade idea. I've been on the trade train for a really long time. I think that there's enough depth in this draft early on to do it. And I think that there's enough sweetness in that second round to justify it.
Yes, there absolutely. I think there is. And specifically, you could tell me if you feel differently on the order in which you would do it. But if you do trade down, I think I would go offensive lineman in the first round, receiver in the second round, because I think you're likely or more likely to find an impact wide receiver in the second round than the impact offensive tackle in the second round. Do you agree with that logic, or would you do the reverse of that and do wide receiver first and then?
No, I agree 100%. Unless there was you know, if they didn't say specifically AVT, we have no plans to move them. We want to keep them in one position. If there was still a lot of versatility on their minds and open mindedness, I'd say, oh, you could bulk up the interior offensive line in that later round because the second and third rounds are going to be very rich in that position, especially because of the versatility of Tippmann, where you could just take a really good center and move Tippmann over. But I think given that after the first round, it doesn't seem like there's anybody that's going to be really left that can play tackle right away, and they're going to be more of a development risk type project. I agree 100%. I think Fontenot is really growing on me in the trade down scenario because there's a guy that could be there at 15 to 20 that is kind of like it's like an AVT 2.0, right? Which would be really nice if you're going to take a number 1 pick that's not going to be named a starter day 1, but they could play all 4 offensive line positions outside of center. Now your point to that argument of how do you pick a guy you're not going to utilize is, do you really believe the Jets are going to play 17 games where the 4 offensive linemen outside of center are going to be healthy all 17 games and not have an injury?
There is not a snowball's chance in hell that happens. I hope it does. I hope Tyron Smith turns back the clock to 2015 and is playing all 17 games. But I think best case scenario, you're looking at like 13 games out of him. Morgan Moses had, pectoral surgery and missed a few games last year. So that's another one who, again, maybe he misses a handful of games. And, AVT has had back-to-back season-ending injuries. Now, granted, I think, neither one of those ones were like repeat injuries. They're both kind of isolated freak things, but you really never know. If you were to take an offensive lineman in the first round, I think they eventually get on the field. Really, it's more about, I think, how the regime feels about Carter Warren's development and to a lesser extent, Max Mitchell.
Yeah, they might love Carter Warren to the extent that they believe he's ready to play tackle if they need him. And that level of confidence, I agree 100%. And then Max Mitchell, people have to understand, he had a really good rookie year as far as meeting and surpassing expectations of what we could have asked of him. And he had a second season where he was dealing with health issues the whole offseason. And it's not far-fetched or making excuses to say that definitely had an impact on what we saw last year. And now that he's healthy, he has a full offseason and now a training camp as a healthy player. to, maybe to get back on track in his development. So that's up to them. They behind the scenes, I think, know a lot more than we do about those players' developments and how much coaching they're giving them and their potential of what they could be coached up on. We can only judge from what we're seeing. And I think from what we're seeing, I think the average Jet fan agrees that they would feel better with a guy like Fontenot, like sitting there waiting if needed to come in any of those positions than the guys we're talking about right now.
100%. I'm with you on that one. I think that would make it a ton of sense because of his flexibility. Now, Alan gives a few trade back options that I wanted to go through with you. He has trade down to Indy for 15, 82, and 117, taking Bowers. Trade down to Cincy for 18 and 49, targeting Bowers again. Or trade down to Philly with a fourth for 22, 50, and 53, and going with Mitchell in that spot.
I don't want to trade down too low. I mean, I'm okay going down to 15. I'm okay going down to 18. And I'm perfectly fine taking Bowers with those picks. So we were just talking about offensive line, but the other side of the coin was wide receiver. I think Bowers, to me, I don't look at it as the normal tight end. I look at it as the equivalent of taking a weapon, as if you were taking a wide receiver. I mean, at least that would be the goal of the pick. You're not looking for your typical tight end if you take Bowers. If you take Bowers, you're taking him with the expectation that he is going to have the impact on a game that a Kelce, that a Gronkowski. I mean, that's what you're shooting for with a guy like Bowers. You're shooting for a difference maker in the game.
Yeah, exactly. It's, as I think we need to put out there, like, this is not a standard tight end. He is a weapon. I think that's the best way to describe it. He could line up at inline tight end. He could line up in the slot, out wide, in the backfield. He's kind of done a little bit of everything at Georgia, and I'd be really excited if he was added to the New York Jets at 15, or if the Jets did the trade back to Cincy at 18. I really think Bowers would probably come off the board to the Colts if they don't go corner, though. So I don't know if you would land him, but maybe that's a spot where you're getting A.D. Mitchell, who is someone who's really grown on me a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's the beautiful thing. I mean, like, no matter what, there's going to be great players there. That's why we would do it. We're not going to get shut out of everything. And that's the other thing about not having a specific need. If we don't sign Smith, and we don't have a left tackle, the flexibility to trade back becomes an issue, because it's like we literally are putting ourselves in a position where we're not going to address the position at all because there's no one there that can actually plug and play in the position. So the flexibility now is there to trade back and not panic, because there's going to be someone there. And no matter what we do, we're in a position where we could take almost any position, right? You could sit there and, I mean, it could be, and nobody wants to say defensive player, but there are going to be so few defensive players selected in the first 10 picks that there might be some amazing value there. And now you added on your second round pick or whatever you traded down for, and you can go for offensive line and wide receiver, and with the gain capital that you just received. So I don't know. It's to me, trading down is a lot less scary.
Alan but gives us a little bit more context to what he's saying. The parentheses is what the team would covet. Sorry, I didn't specify. I want the Jets to take Fashanu, Guyton, Mims, or a JPJ in a trade down spot. I love JPJ, but I wanted to ask you your thoughts, and you might have to talk for a second here because my dog's been scratching at the door for the last 10 minutes, and I just got to let her out quick. But do you think JPJ is still in play for the Jets after their free agency period? Go ahead and give me two seconds.
Okay. I do think that he's in play, because I think what we're talking about now is best player available. So if JD has JPJ extremely high on the board, and he's the highest player on the board, you can make an argument for it. And the argument could be, we're taking the best player on the board here. We're going to move Tippmann over, or have Tippmann, and then we're going to be overstacked in the guard position, and it's going to be competition, and there's going to be a guy left over. I mean, it's less, when you say it like that, it sounds silly, and it's not something I feel comfortable with, and only in the sense I would love the player, but I would be like, what are you really going to do? You can't bench Simpson. You can't bench, you can't bench AVT. You're not going to bench Tippmann. You're not going to draft JPJ and not start him because he's probably a top 8 center in the league the day he walks and puts on a uniform. So what do you do? But at the same time, if you were asking me if he's still in play for the Jets, JD is the best available player GM. That's who he is. So I don't think it's impossible that he would pick him. It stresses me out because I don't know how you'd make it work. But I wouldn't say it's something that's impossible. I would say it was very unlikely. It's right at the level of us taking a quarterback. Like, it could happen, but it would be very surprising, and it's not very likely.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I don't think it is crazy likely, again, just because they filled a lot of the interior. Like, AVT is not going to go anywhere. Joe Tippmann's kind of locked in at center now, and you're not going to bench John Simpson, at least with tackle. Like, you can give the illusion that, one, maybe they're competing for the starting right tackle spot and Morgan Moses is your swing at that price, or he's the first one in line after injury, especially if it's someone who could play guard, because chances are one of your 4 offensive linemen is going to get hurt somewhere. So I'm with you on that one. I love the prospect, but I don't think so. Mikey Bush has, can JPJ play tackle? Which I would say absolutely no. I don't think so.
But it's funny because if you wanted to, and I think this is more of a realistic option, if you want to bulk up the interior offensive line, a perfect pick is that guy Zinter, because here you have a guy who broke his leg, might not be ready to play, but is a first-round talent without the injury. You get a guy like that in the 4th round. We have our 3 starters. You let him sit for a year. Then you come back that following year. We got a bunch of guys that aren't in contract. We're going to need potentially need a lot of help on that offensive line. And now you have a guy that should have been a first-round guy but got hurt. We stole him in the 4th round, and he's ready to come in. And we see teams like Baltimore doing things like that all the time.
Absolutely. We got first super chat of the day, so I want to toss that up. Good vibes. Thank you so much for your support. It says, do we draft QB3 or sign a free agent? Please no Zach Wilson. Look, I don't think you have to worry about Zach Wilson being on this roster. I think maybe they'll try to move him at the NFL draft during that weekend and be like, hey, can we use him to get any sort of swaps or whatever it is? If not, I think he'll be released. I don't think he's on the roster in any way, shape, or form. Now, supposedly, they're going to be meeting with Jordan Travis, who is a projected late day 2, early day 3 quarterback. Do you have any thoughts on Jordan Travis as the guy who the New York Jets draft to sit behind Tyrod Taylor and Aaron Rodgers?
Well, he's the perfect one because you could put him on the IR and not take up a 53rd roster spot. Like when he gives you that, he has that story behind him of if he wasn't injured, what could he have been? So we don't know his ceiling. Like a lot of guys, once you're not drafting them in the early rounds, the odds of them panning out are very slim historically. But here's a guy who knows. He has similarities to some of the top quarterbacks in the draft, and it was injury. So again, the biggest cost to a QB3, like when people say, oh, in the late rounds, do you take a developmental quarterback? The biggest cost of doing that is a roster spot. Because if you take anyone that's a known name that any other team is going to want, as soon as they have an injury at quarterback, they're going to poach him from you, right? Because what are you going to do? Draft a quarterback and then put him on the practice squad? If you protect him in the 53, now we all know how difficult it was last year to cut down the roster to 53 and how upsetting it was for us to have to let guys walk. Well, right. That's the biggest cost of a QB3. We have to let one other player. We're going to have to let a player walk. We're going to have to make a very difficult cut.
Yeah, and that's the hard part of, filling out, as you said, the hard part of filling out the 53. And the potential to IR him, I think, is makes him that much more appealing as an option. I do think that they end up drafting someone though at some point, whether it's him, Spencer Rattler, Michael Pratt, someone in that range. I don't think they're going to spend an early pick on him. I guess on a quarterback rather. I guess we could talk about that for a draft strategy too. Like, is that even something that you're considering? Like, okay, now the Jets filled up, they have their wide receiver too, and they filled out their starting offensive line. Now you could take Michael Penix or Bo Nix at 10. Do you buy that?
I'm going to pull out my Chris Rock and say that my reaction would be, I don't know if he should have taken a quarterback, JD, but I understand. That would be my reaction if he took a quarterback early. It would be, I don't know if I would have done it. I'm not condoning it. But I could make the argument. I could. If someone, in debate class, they force you to take a side, whether you want to or not, that wouldn't be an impossible debate for me. I could sit there and debate and give examples and fight a fight of why it wouldn't be the most horrendous thing in the world if Jaden Daniels or someone he loves slipped to 10 and he took him. I know it would upset the Jets fan base. It would concern the hell out of me. Like, it's not what I would do. No. But I would understand why he did it. I would understand the logic. I wouldn't think he needs to be committed into a mental institution. I would actually understand what the thinking is in doing that move.
Now, what about a defensive player? Edge rusher at 10, does that do it? Does that put you say we have to get him in a mental institution at that point?
I don't buy into defense right now. I think that there's very hard to convince me that to be okay with that move, to take a defensive player, because at this point we have just never scored points. Like, it's like what we were saying with Edge a couple of years ago before we had edges. It's like me and Greenby would say it. They always find an excuse to not take an edge. And for years we haven't had one, and it's killing this organization. And I think I could do the same thing, the same argument. Like, really, we're going to find another excuse to not invest in this offense and overinvest in it to assure that we could finally score some points. We have a good defense. The defense we're running back is already really good. We have not had a good offense, arguably since 2015. If you want to, you could use that as an example of a good offense, but it wasn't sustainable and it was a one-year thing. We haven't had a sustainable real offense forever. I don't know in my lifetime if we've ever had a consistent, sustainable offense that scores lots of points in the league and is a top 10 offense in the league for 4 or 5 years in a row. Can we start to get on that? Because you kind of need to score points to win games.
Yeah, it's not great. Looking back, like, there was 3 okay years in a row from 2008 to 2010, and then 2015 was the last outlier. But since 2015, they are ready for this run in points scored from 2016 to now. 30, 24, 23, 31, 32, 28, 29, 29.
Yeah,
it's horrible.
Yeah, I mean, you can't take defense at 10. When you read that out, it's just, that's mental institution. That's like the definition of insanity beyond belief.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. We got a Zach Truther in the building. Let's toss it up on the screen. Zach Truther here. There's no point. There's no point in cutting Zach Wilson. He should be QB3. We started 4 quarterbacks last year. Is it far-fetched that we would need him? If someone grabs him off the practice squad, cap relief. Your thoughts, Jets? I'll let you go first.
Oh, well, and that surprised me, that last sentence. That's not so much what we'd expect from the Zach Truther, because sometimes when you say Zach Truther, you're still insisting that he could be a great quarterback and none of this was his fault. But look, if that's true, and I think it is, if putting him on the practice squad and somebody picking him up and poaching him means they have to pay him, and they really, if that's true, because I don't know enough to definitively say it is, I would be okay with that for sure, because I don't care, but I can understand why they don't want him in there as a distraction after everything that's happened. When the owner of the team comes out and says, we lost because we didn't have a competent quarterback, it's really hard then to look him in the face at camp and say, yeah, we believe in you.
It's just better for both sides to move on. That is my take on it here, that you are better off just releasing than keeping him around again for just it's like a dark cloud hovering over the Jets, and it would have to be something that we talk about for another 6 months because it just won't die for whatever reason. I don't think it's worth it. I think they should get the next guy in here on the rookie deal. Zach Wilson's a lame duck quarterback anyway, because he'd be on the final year of his contract. You're not picking up his 5th-year option. No one's picking him up at that cost off your practice squad anyway. If he could even go on the practice squad, I'm not sure if he can because of the number of games he's played. But yeah, I'm gonna say hard pass on that one.
You know, the worst part of it would be that if knock on wood anything happened to Aaron Rodgers, we'd have people in the chat saying, "Forget Taylor, they should put in Zach Wilson." I can't do that. Like I can't. I would just shut off my computer. I would stop streaming. I can't have that conversation with people.
How about your friend of the program, Tony the GM, says Murphy is in play at 10. Do you agree with him?
I understand if JD was to do it. I really do. I don't think I think that I think there's enough of a justification for it that to say at the very least it's not crazy. When
it's
people
crazy. It's okay. You could say I know Tony likes to play the puppet behind the scenes on your show, but you could say that it's a little nuts.
It would be a shock. It would be a shock. I mean, here, look, I'm going to jump into JD's shoes for a second and explain myself. If I'm JD, this is how, and I'm not arguing for it because everyone's going to attack me now for 3 weeks. He said we should draft. No. I'm saying if I was JD, this is how I guess he would, this is my guess of how he would justify the pick. He could say, as an example, nobody thought it was a good idea that Green Bay Packer fans lost their crap when they took Jordan Love. No Green Bay fan is upset that they took Jordan Love right now. They're all very happy about it. You have a quarterback that we have that's going to play for the next 2 years, and then we're paying him $65 million and no quarterback in 2026. To make the argument of this is one of the richest drafts maybe in the last 20 years in quality quarterbacks, and this is maybe our last opportunity to have such a high pick to grab one, and he could sit behind an Aaron Rodgers for 2 years, and then you have your guy for the future. I'm not saying again, I'm just saying that would be the argument JD would make. So base it off of that argument, and you could scream about it and curse him out all you want, but that would be the argument. And is that such a horrible argument if JD made that argument?
Well, one, hello, Green Bean. He's hanging out. Says I can't take how good looking Jeremy is. This is true. It's very hard to do a show with someone who is such eye candy to the camera, and then me with the face for radio up here. I think I would projectile vomit at the main event in Farmingdale if they took a defensive tackle in the top 10. Yeah, I would be down in a bad way. I would be taking advantage of the 3-hour open bar. I can tell you that much at the very least.
Oh, I thought he meant McCarthy, by the way. Everything I said was based on taking JJ McCarthy.
Are you serious?
That's what I thought he meant. That's what I was
saying. No, the defensive tackle, Byron Murphy.
Oh no! I would projectile Bob. I didn't expect that. No, I didn't.
It was crazy.
I didn't expect that from Tony because I thought he wants to take a quarterback. So I thought he was making because he actually wants to take a quarterback. He thinks the Jets should take a quarterback.
Okay.
That's
so do you change your?
Oh no! Projectile vomit. Projectile vomit.
Okay. We were just defending your guy for 3 minutes.
Quarterback. No. I would projectile vomit. Are you kidding me? A defensive tackle, especially in a draft. I want to reiterate this, especially in a draft that in the 3rd and 4th round, there's defensive tackles all over the place.
Right.
That we all love and like, or at least like. So it would be absolutely ridiculous to waste the 10 pick on a defensive tackle when in the 3rd round you could pick a Chris Jenkins or a what's his name? Frisk. Brand. There's a few really good ones that will be there at 72 if we really wanted one.
Reality check. I'm more confused than before. It's so freaking funny. That's so good.
20 threw me off because I don't know why he threw defensive tackle out there when all he's been talking about for 3 months with me is we have to take a quarterback.
So that whole answer was you thinking we were talking quarterback when
yes.
Byron Murphy was actually, I should have said the first name instead of just Murphy. But anyway, good.
Irish, Irish. Same thing to me.
Oh, that was
Murphy, McCarthy, What's
great
the
stuff. So we went over a ton on the draft strategy. We had something else that we wanted to get into today that I think by seeing who's in here on the chat, I think we're going to get both sides of the argument here for this next topic. If you want to get into that, Jeremy.
Okay, sure.
So Joe Douglas's record is something that gets brought up a ton when you look at what he's done as the general manager. I just want to pull up so we have the exact record. I believe it's 18-57, but I don't want to misquote. Let's see, 7-7 is 14. No, it's got to be more than that. 23-57 then. Pro Football Reference isn't loading on me, which is really frustrating. Why I typed it in, but yeah, back-to-back 7-10 seasons. You had a 4-13 season. You had a 2-14 season. And then you had a 7-9 season. But the main point that I think that Jeremy wanted to make here, it's 27-56, by the way, 27-56, is that the record. Maybe don't put as much stock into the record. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that was what I gathered from when we were talking.
I'm not saying it's completely irrelevant, and it doesn't mean when someone says he has to start winning. I agree, he has to start winning. But when somebody says we should fire him now, he's awful, and they're going to define him on that record alone, that is the laziest take I've ever heard in my life. There is nothing lazier than that. To just, when you're only, and there's somebody on Twitter who does it all the time. He won't talk about anything else. He'll just constantly say the record, right? And it's all he talks about. It's the laziest thing in the world. Because, and here's what I mean by that. Prefaced by the fact that, yes, we have to win. We have to start winning. When he took over the team, it wasn't his team. Like, he didn't have the full GM, full control job, right? He had to work with Adam Gase. We have no idea who was in charge of what and how much power he had. So I like to start his tenure from the Jamal Adams trade. That's where I start I go back to the Jamal Adams trade for where I start the real tenure of JD, right? If you look at the roster at that time, you look at the dead cap money, we were in shambles. The best players on that roster aren't even here now. At that time, our best hope, our best players were Marcus May. We all know what happened there. And everybody went nuts when we let him go. How can you not retain him, right? An average safety who had a DUI on his head, right? Who ended up doing nothing in the rest of his career. So it ended up being the smartest move in the world not to commit to him when he tore his Achilles. We had Denzel Mims. We all know what happened there. Green Bean will fight this, but unfortunately he didn't work out. We had Becton, who has done very little to help the team. A horrible year last year. Injuries after that. So he basically took over a team where the only people we have weren't even contributors. He started with nothing. And now look at the roster now. Forget about record. Every argument outside of the record. Look at the roster right now. Look what it was last year before we went into the season even. In 2023, just 2 to 3 years later. How do you say that GM, even with some mistakes overall, didn't do his job?
Can I give you some pushback on that? I don't think Joe Douglas is horrible and deserves to be fired, but I also am not a Joe Douglas truther. And I'm not saying that you're going as far as being a Joe Douglas truther, but you mentioned some names like Mekhi Becton and Denzel Mims. He drafted those guys, though. Yeah. He has to get some blame for some of the mistakes that he's made in the 2020 draft class. There's a very real chance that there are going to be 0 players on the 2024 Jets from that draft class in this upcoming season.
Sure. Look, he missed on quarterback. Right now, you have to look at, to be fair, right? It's not like he was making outlandish picks that were so out there, right? It wasn't Daniel Jones at 6. It wasn't these outlandish picks that had people scratching their head. We were screaming for Denzel Mims. The Green Bay fans, when the Green Bay took Jordan Love, were cursing the TV because they didn't take Denzel Mims. So it's not like he's the only guy that was in love with Denzel Mims. Becton, nobody in the middle of his first season, of Becton's first season, nobody was criticizing JD for taking Becton. It looked like the pick of the century, right? And then a guy rolled over his leg and everything went to shit after that. But for a while, it looked like a great pick. And if you look at do we analyze every GM that way? Because if you look at every GM, all 30 plus GMs in the league, you don't think if you look at their last 3 or 4 years, there's going to be misses?
I think yes, but most of those GMs I would think have a few more wins stacked under their belt to get the benefit of the doubt. Now, injuries do play a big part of that, right? Like Aaron Rodgers going down last year derailed it, but at the same time, I think you could get on Joe Douglas for not having a legitimate backup quarterback and backup plan for Aaron Rodgers going down, and then sitting on his hands at the deadline and adding only Roger Saffold, who I still have no idea where Roger Saffold is.
Yeah, he made look. He's not perfect, and I'm not saying unfortunately, the bar is very low for the Jets, so he still might be the best GM we've had since 2008. But while he's not perfect, until you name or somebody names a better GM, that if we fired him, okay, now what? Because you know what I mean? Like everybody says, oh, fire this person, but then you have to get somebody else. And if there's no one specific out there, he's still, even with those mistakes, look what he's accomplished. Even with those mistakes, look who's signing with us and wants to be here. Last year, why did A-Rod want to be here? Because they see potential in this roster. If A-Rod doesn't go down fourth play last year, and I know he messed up by not having a better backup quarterback, but at the same time, if he doesn't go back, if he doesn't get hurt, we're easily 11-12 wins last year.
I tend to agree that they are an 11 win team roughly with Aaron Rodgers at the helm, but I do think that there's some more blame that should be on his shoulders for not having the backup plan. And like in free agency this year, he's probably been his best on paper, his best free agency period outside of DJ Reed and Tyler Conklin through his first 5 years, or really 4, we won't count 2019, has been a struggle.
Well, Connor McGovern, did he originally bring him in? He was an okay center.
That I wouldn't be hanging my hat on Connor McGovern.
But look at but George Mosley. I mean, these are guys that we wish we had. We're happy to have one back. One guy. I mean, these are all people he had also brought in. I mean, there's just good and bad. But overall, again, I go back to overall look at our roster. I don't remember the Jets having on paper a roster this good, maybe in my life. Like I have to go back to, the 2010 year, the 1998 year. I mean, this is probably top 5 roster in our history.
Yeah, I think a big part of that is the addition of the Aaron Rodgers trade, which he has to get credit for, but it's also it took him a long time to get the offensive line right, and there's still a question on whether it is going to be right or not with the injury history of Tyron Smith, and it does feel like the tackles are band-aid fixes, so they are still going to be needs going into 2025 and beyond too. And I don't want this I don't want this to be me being a Joe Douglas hater. Like I don't feel that way about Joe Douglas. I just want to tell both sides of it. I'm like lukewarm on him. I don't want him fired. I think there is a ton of pressure on him this year, though. And if he doesn't make the playoffs, I think they should, clear house with both Saleh and Douglas. I think this team should make the playoffs. And I do agree that the roster is in a better place. But I think for a GM who's been here for 5 years, his leash is a little bit long from some of the fans, and it's also too short from another section as well. Like we're not going to deny that. I think people are too harsh on him, but I do think that his leash being significantly longer than Robert Saleh's is something that is hard for me to compute.
I think he's right where he should be. He has to win this year or he's gone. I agree 100%.
Okay.
I think that this is the magic year. Last year, we had him run it back because Rodgers got hurt. So we ran it back. Fine. Because that'll always be a mystery of what would have happened last year. And he made mistakes, and he's partly responsible for the fact that we didn't make a playoff run. So I'm in the same exact place. If we come out there, I don't care what the excuses are. If it's injuries, I don't care. If we don't win over 10 games and make the playoffs, he's gone. Clear house.
Right, because like I don't think he gets an injury excuse on the offensive line for a third year in a row. Like eventually you just got like eventually it's enough of the excuses and just find a way. And that's where I am now. Again, I didn't want him coming out of 2023. I wasn't saying fire Joe Douglas and fire Robert Saleh. My opinion on it was okay, like this is it. This is the playoff mandate. It's playoff for or bust for both of you guys. And I think, and you tell me how you feel about it. I think they should be tied together. I'm not fire Joe Douglas, keep Robert Saleh, or fire Robert Saleh and keep Joe Douglas. I think they were like, it's good to keep your coach and GM on the same timeline. And I don't think one deserves a longer leash over the other.
No way. And they're in complete in sync. I mean, sometimes you have it where they're opposed and then you realize one was right and who's the problem. But these guys have publicly said it. We think exactly the same way. We're on the same exact page, which is why if you have to fire one, you have to fire both. Because if you have to fire them, if they don't win this year, that means they both failed. The whole philosophy failed. And they both have very publicly bought in to the philosophy that they're following right now. So no question about it. If they don't make the playoffs this year, I don't care if it was because everyone got hurt. It doesn't matter. You could just blame karma and say it wasn't meant to be for you guys. Sorry. Maybe you are a victim. Maybe it wasn't your fault. It doesn't matter. It wasn't meant to be. It's just not happening here for you guys. And we need a new start. And I agree 100%. He has to win this year. I'm just saying his record from the past does not make or tempt me to fire him. Like when people were saying a month ago, fire him, my attitude towards that was, if you fire him, there's got to be a better reason than just the record, because every GM starts at a different place with what they take over. And he took over a situation where for those first couple of years was just it was like starting with a new franchise.
Yeah. No, I'm with you.
With a new franchise.
And before we get into Golden Robert has a super chat we'll get to in a second. I want to pop up, but my last thing that I wanted to get right now on this is that I also think that I don't think anyone should be using this offseason as a victory lap and be like, you got to apologize to Joe Douglas now because of what he did. I think that should be, can we wait until, like, can the bar be a playoffs? Can it not be a great winning the offseason again? Can we wait and have the bar be the playoffs before the apology tour?
Yeah, I don't think there should be an apology tour or any receipts yet, because we've felt this way in a lot of off seasons. I mean, for the last 3 or 4 off seasons, 3 years ago, they're saying Zach Wilson is going to throw 40 touchdowns. I mean, we've been celebrating every off season forever as Jet fans. So, no, obviously, if there's going to be any, I told you so on JD, that's going to have to wait until we're not only in the playoffs, but winning a playoff game.
Yeah, maybe like if we're in the parking lot for a home playoff game in January, I'm willing to have that discussion, right? That's a little bit different. Golden Robert is making a comparison saying the Jet season will be like the Mets, no starting rotation, average outfield. What is the comparison from baseball to football on the no starting rotation to average outfield? Any interpretation on that?
I know, because pitching to me is quarterback, the guy throwing the ball. And we got Aaron Rodgers. And I feel pretty good about Aaron Rodgers right now, honestly. I know a lot of people are in different places, because of the injury and everything. I don't think it's a significant injury as far as impacting him because of where the injury was. It's not his throwing foot. It's not his throwing arm. There's a million things. If it was his throwing rotator cuff, that would be a lot more concerning to me than the ankle that he doesn't throw off of. The fact that we saw him throwing beautiful passes and jogging around 2 months after the surgery makes me feel pretty good about next year. The fact that we don't need him to be an MVP, the expectation, we don't need him to be an MVP. We just need him to be a competent quarterback, is all I need to say I don't understand the analogy, because I feel like the weapons are there. The outfielders to me are the weapons, right? Garrett Wilson, outfielder.
Yeah.
Mike Williams, outfielder. So I just don't get it. Now it seems like the opposite.
Yeah, I don't get the analogy. I do like, if you want to go Mets for a second, the starting rotation without Kodai Senga is definitely a question mark, right? You have a bunch of depth guys in after that, and I mean, I like Nimmo, but Marte is a question mark, and Harrison Bader is average. So maybe, I mean, his point about the Mets is probably fair. I just don't know how it computes to the Jets.
I know, because the Mets on paper are very bad. The Jets on paper are very good. Now, there's other analogies you could do of probably some of teams were in the past, maybe with the Yankees or even the Mets in the past, when they were very good on paper and on the field sucked.
Last year's Mets.
Right. And that would be troublesome. And I think the argument for that could be, yeah, you have a lot of good names on the offensive line, but are they going to gel? They've never played together. Is there going to be continuity? Those are the concerns or the arguments that I would understand.
Now, Duncan has something that I want to run by you for an option, because remember before you were saying if you move on from JD, what do you do? He says if JD is going, hire Greenbean.
Duncan, I love you, Duncan. You're great. Hey, it would be a hell of it would be the most entertaining thing that could happen to us all as Jet fans. But let's go back and look at his track record. If you go back and look at his track record, Greenbean has been right a lot more than he's been wrong.
He knows something. He's one of the wiser Jet fans out there. Now, may have held on to the Denzel Mims stock a little bit too long, which is fair. Look, I liked Mims a lot in that draft. I was very excited about it. I wanted to give him the chance.
And Perrine,
but would have the best tight end room in the league. That's for sure. But every single mid-round pick, I think, would be on interior defensive linemen and depth guards, which I'm not opposed to that. The Jets could use more of that in both instances. And this team would punch you in the mouth. It'll be ground and pound football. They're not going to score a lot of points, probably. I don't see Greenbean's team airing it out and being an air raid offense like the late 90s, early 2000s Rams, but a modern version of the 2009 Jets, maybe something like that.
Yeah. I think that's the team in his mind he's building.
I think so.
It's not that far off from what we were in '98. Even, I mean, come on, like we're talking about, we're not going to talk about Testaverde like he was some franchise quarterback, like he was like put him up there with Peyton Manning. I mean, it was Vinny Testaverde. What made that offense work? Curtis Martin, great offensive line, great defense. You go back to the sack exchange. We had a little bit more explosiveness there when we got Ken O'Brien, but with Richard Todd, it was great defense. Freeman McNeil.
4 yards of play wins the game. Yeah, Brees Hall would have 45 carries a game. I love it. But in all seriousness, yes, Greenbean, one of the more well-respected Jets content creators with his ideology.
He's just ugly.
I would be in on it. I just would like to be a part of his staff in some capacity. I don't know what it would be. I'm sure you'd be there as well.
Oh my God. I'd be his whipping boy. Like I'd be the guy that takes the beating every time.
The fall guy. You got to be the fall.
I'd be the guy, like, you ever see the movie with Kevin Costner? I'm the intern where he breaks the computer. He takes the computer, he smashes the computer. That would be me. It's Chaos's fault.
Yeah, grabbing the coffee, running it up to him. Oh God, all the good stuff. All the good stuff there. I love it. Let's get back into the chat in here. He says, you guys hear hip tackle might be penalized. Defense is going to be punished. That's why we should focus on offensive picks. I think the NFL makes it harder and harder for defensive players to play the sport of football. I agree with them trying to take out the headshots, right? Like, I don't think anyone should be launching themselves. Any defender should be launching themselves into quarterback. Anyone's like head-to-head hits, that stuff should be taken out. But like at some point, like, just put flags on the guys if this is what it's going to be. But I don't think any players really have a big issue with the hip tackles.
Yeah, getting very tired of our game being just completely stripped of its core context of what makes it football, like the roughness, the violence. I understand you can't have helmet to helmet, yet we want to protect these guys, not have them, with the concussions and later on in life. And all that's understandable, but they are getting to a point where it's like, I mean, where that one guy in our chat once, when me and Greenbean were doing a football reaction, one of our reaction streams, someone said excessive tackling, and we made a big joke of it. That was his complaint, excessive tackling. But you know what? It's we were joking about it, but it's feeling like it's not such a joke anymore. Like they're going to call a flag because they're going to call a flag, and the reason's going to be you did too good of a job tackling the guy. You tackled him too hard.
Yeah, you hit him too hard.
Yeah.
And I'm not against hard, like shoulder pads to the chest, line him up, big tackle. Keep it. That's good. That's fair game. It's the obvious big hits to the head or the dirty. I also don't like going at the knees too. I think that's dirty, but keep it from the thigh pads to the bottom of the face mask to the upper chest. That should be fair game, no?
Yeah. I mean, and some of those blocking penalties. The one on was it on? It was on Lazard. It was on Lazard. I mean, I know he should have known better not to do it, but my God, I mean, it's just you're trained as a player. Block the first guy you see.
Yeah, that was weak. That was one of the weaker ones of the season. Johnny wants to know which X-Men character would play on our Jets and why. So are you an X-Men guy, Jeremy, number one? And then who would you choose?
I'm an X-Men guy to an extent. I'm not much of a comic nerd. My brother is, but I like it enough and watch the movies enough to say that. I mean, I'm definitely gonna say I want Wolverine.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm not a big X-Men guy, so really Wolverine's really the only one that I know. But how do you not pick the guy with the claws coming out of his hands?
Right. I mean, what a great stiff arm move, right? It's like you hold your arm out, and you stick your claws out into the guy's face mask and just rip his eyes out.
Right. Or maybe he could play like defensive end, and then like if a running back is trying to get to the edge, he just sticks his claw out and grabs him.
Absolutely.
Papa Yeti says Colossus. I don't know that one. I don't know enough about him.
I mean, there's the one guy who teleports. That would be kind of cool. Give me the football and I just teleport to the into the end zone. I'm spiking the ball.
Yeah, that would be perfect, right? You just zoop right into the end zone and scores there. That'd be ideal. Now, as we're getting to the final few minutes here of the show, Jeremy, I guess now I think that everyone's mind is what do the Jets do next, right? Because they filled offensive line starters, they add in a wide receiver too. I think now is kind of about filling out your depth the rest of the way. So are there any players or even positional groups that you would like to see the Jets look at?
Yeah, I mean, I still think we have work to do on the interior of the offensive line, like whether it's bring back McGovern. I think we need a backup center. So once you get that, you're by default you're kind of creating backup guard, because if you have a backup center that's good that you trust, if a guard gets hurt, you could always slide Titman over, or just do what's best, because the backup center might be able to play guard as well, like a McGovern. Even McGovern, $2 million deal, just bring him back. He knows the line. He knows the team. He's a good leader in the locker room. He's a good mentor to Joe Titman. I'd like to see just something like that. Just bring back McGovern. And then I don't know, our wide receiver 3 is still Lazard or Gibson. I mean, do we feel good about that?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
So for me, I think you bring up 2 good ones. I'm going to release a video later this afternoon, and part of it is talking about guys that should be retained. And the names that I brought up were Justin Hardy, Connor McGovern, and Ashton Davis. I know Ashton Davis is looking for a place to start potentially, but him still being on the market going into week 3 of free agency, maybe that tells you that other teams don't view him as a starter, and then he'd like to come back to be essentially the third safety. McGovern, for all the reasons that you just said. Hardy, like, I don't know. There was sneaky a big difference in the special teams game when he was out there versus when he wasn't. The game we were all at against the Chargers, there's a big punt return for a touchdown in that game. They let up over like 100 yards of returns in that one. It was really tough. But I'm kind of in on the idea of one, 𝐒𝐿𝐽𝐽 Clowney, who they met with earlier this week, but also, what do you think of Ezekiel Elliott as RB2 for the Jets? Usually I don't like the former name who was, a star somewhere else, but I kind of think he fits with the Jets' needs as he's a good short yardage back and a good pass protector.
Yeah, I mean, he knows how to protect the football. He still showed some explosiveness last year. It's not like he's suddenly sluggish. And I actually, think, from the little bit I've seen him talking and seen him interacting from Hard Knocks way back when a few years ago, he's actually seems like a good leader type of guy. Like he was helping the other running backs. He's almost like a little bit of a running back coach kind of role, like just to be that experienced veteran that the younger guys, maybe Wakanda could talk to. Izzy could talk to him, bounce off his brain. Even Breece Hall is still a young guy who could, he can give it just advice about stardom and handling, whatever. But like, he seems like a good guy. And I think when you're looking at him from the perspective of a backup role completely, he's a backup. I agree 100%. Good compliment, like nice goal line guy. Maybe you could bring him, you could bring him in on 3rd and inches and everything. And he might be able to help the team that way.
Right, because I don't think you want Rodgers doing the 3rd and 4th down in less than 1 quarterback sneak move. But if you put Ruckert back as the fullback and then run Zeke behind him into line of scrimmage to get you a yard or two, I think there's some value in that one. Jordan's a member of the channel. He uses a chat, says Lazard is slightly underrated by Jets fan. Last year before the season, he was massively overrated. Lazard is wide receiver 3 or 4 is not bad. Now, if you said wide receiver 4, I think I would agree with you, but I don't want to see him in a spot where if they're going 3 wide, he's one of the starters out there.
Yeah, and my fear is what if like Lazard, what if knock on wood, Garrett or Mike Williams goes down? Now Lazard's your number 2. That's what scares me the most. But it's true. We're harder on Lazard than he probably deserves. He was on the worst offense, one of the worst offenses historically last year, the way our offensive line was and Zach Wilson. And every mistake he made was extra highlighted and bullet pointed. You can't erase what he did the years before that. There was a year where he got 8, like 2 years ago, I got 800 yards. That's great WR2 numbers. So I think what we're really concerned about is, can you rely on him? It's about reliability. He broke our trust. Is the potential there that he could be a great WR3? Yeah, if he plays like he did 2 years ago, but do we trust him?
Yep. I'm with you on that. I think Johnny's question's a good place to close out the show. He goes, question, are we bringing the flight crew? And at MetLife, are they going to sell bacon, egg, and cheeses on a roll with salt, pepper, and ketchup? Johnny, for the I agree with the bacon, egg, and cheese on a roll, salt, pepper, ketchup is better than anything they're pushing in Jersey with the pork roll or the Taylor ham. Don't fall for it. Go to New York or Long Island. Go to your favorite deli, bodega, wherever. Get yourself a little bacon, egg, and cheese. I know Jeremy's going to agree with me on that one.
Every day of the week and Sunday.
I love it. Is the flight crew coming back? I'm going to be honest, I have no idea.
Don't know.
Don't
pay attention to that stuff.
No, Jeremy, come on. He's too busy looking at what's going on the field, breaking down everything going on in the field. So good stuff as always for another episode of Reality Check. Please make sure to subscribe to the channel here over on Talkin Jets. You get us every Thursday at 3 p.m. You also have the regular show on Tuesday. You got Green Bean and our guy Tigo on Wednesday evenings, and then Dom C and Ryan doing their draft coverage on Monday night. So a ton of content coming out for you over here. Like the stream before you head out, share with a friend. Matt, he is my co-host, Jeremy, and we will catch you next time.